In this video, we'll learn about image tracking in visionOS, and we'll do that by building this ad blocker where when an ad image of Coke appears, we'll cover that by a black plane. So let's get started learning image detection by building this ad blocker. So I'm going to create a new visionOS app. I'm going to select the visionOS tab here, click on app, and then click next. I'm going to name this project, say Vision Ad Blocker. Again, you can name it whatever you want. And then make sure you set the initial scene to window and immersive space render set to none. And then click next, and then click create. Starting template, which is basically a window that shows a sphere and a hello world text in a VStack. So that's this guy here. I'm just going to get rid of that because we don't need that and replace that with the empty view for now, which we'll replace later. The preview canvas that you see on the right, where we can iterate on our UI, we can't use that for this project because you need an actual device. So I'm going to get rid of the previews because we don't need that. And then I'm going to hide the preview canvas as well. Awesome. So here we're starting from scratch. So the way we're going to build this ad blocker is very simple. So we're going to use image detection to detect when the image appears in the scene. And then we're going to overlay that image with a black plane. So the first thing we need to do is detect the image. For that, we're going to use ARKit. Let's import ARKit here. So first thing, we're going to replace the empty view with a reality view. So a reality view is what you use to display complex 3D scenes in visionOS. It's a SwiftUI view for displaying 3D scenes. And it comes with this content guy here, which essentially contains all the entities in your scene. So everything in a scene is an entity, whether it's visible like 3D models or invisible like audio sources, they're all entities and they're all contained within this content guy here. So anytime you want to add a new thing to the scene, you would add it to the content and it would appear in the scene. So here in the reality views make closure, this guy here, it's what gets called when the reality view is first constructed. So here, I'm going to first create an anchor entity and configure it to detect a certain image in the scene. So anchor entities, you can think of it like locks in the real world, where anything you add as a child to that lock or place on top of that lock will stay there regardless of where the user moves, right? So it stays anchored to the scene. For example, if you want to anchor a sphere to the table, you would create an anchor entity on top of the table, and then the sphere would stay locked there, regardless of the user's movement. Similarly, in this case, we're going to use image anchors. Image anchors essentially looks for a specific image in the scene, and the moment it detects one, it places a lock onto that image to which we can overlay our own content. That's how you create augmented reality experiences. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an image anchor. So I'm going to name this image anchor. And this will be an anchor entity. And for the target, I'm going to click dot. You can see there's plane tracking, head tracking, hand tracking, and all. But we're going to use this image guy here because we're trying to detect an image. So over here, what we need to do is we need to tell ARKit which image to detect, right? In our case, it's that ad image, that advertisement image. I've downloaded this advertisement image. You can download whatever image you want. So what I'll do is go here, assets. I'm going to click on add here. And then go to AR and textures and click create AR resource group. I'm going to name this, say, add images, this group. And in here, you can drag and drop reference images or object files. So here I'm going to drag and drop a reference image, i.e. the image that we want ARKit to track. So I'm going to just drag that advert image that I've downloaded and drag it over here. When you drag it, you can see there's a warning. It says it must have non-zero positive width. And that's because if you click on the image and go to the inspector tab here, the width and the height is set to 0. And for this guy, the more accurate it is, the better. So just try to measure the height and width of your image. And I've done for mine, and in centimeters, it's roughly 9.35 centimeters for the width. And the height would auto-populate to 16. That looks about right. Great, so now I've got the image imported and configured correctly in the assets folder. Just remember the name of the image and the bundle group. So now I'm going to go back to the content guy here. Now here we're providing the reference image to track. For the group, let's add images, the folder that we created, and within that, the image name that we want to track is Coke. Just double check that's correct. Yep, Coke, and add images. Awesome. So at this point, we have an image anchor which looks out for the Coke image in the scene. And whenever it detects one, it will place an anchor or lock there. And a lock by itself is just invisible, right? What we need to do is we need to place our own 3D content, in this case, a rectangular black plane, to essentially hide that image, right? So for that, we need to essentially add that black plane as a child of this anchor and then add the anchor to the scene. That way, the plane would stay locked to this anchor, in other words, locked to the image, and it would essentially hide that image. That's how we're creating an ad blocker very simply. So for that, first we're going to create a computer property here called black plane, and this would be a model entity. A model entity is the kind of entity you want to use for creating 3D objects. A model entity has a mesh and a material, which gives it the visual appearance. So for the mesh first, I'm going to create a plane. So mesh resource generate plane with the width of say 0.0967 centimeters, and then a height of say 0.129 meters. Sorry, this is in meters, not centimeters. Awesome. So that's the mesh, a rectangular plane that will cover our image. And we need a material for this now. So the material, we're going to make it a simple material where the color is black and is metallic is set to false. Great. So that's the mesh and the material, a black material. And now we're going to create a model entity out of those two. So I'm going to say black plane equals model entity. You can create it with a mesh and a material. So for the mesh, I'm going to provide the mesh that we just have. And for materials, I'm going to pass in the material that we just created. Now I'm going to simply return that black plane. Black plane. Now, whenever we call this guy, we will get a black model entity. So this is the 3D content that we want to overlay on the anchor. To overlay this on the anchor, it's simple. We just go here, image anchor dot add child, and we want to add the black plane as a child of the image anchor, right? So we're going to pass in the black plane here. So at this point, we got an image anchor, and as a child, we've added the black plane. That way, the black plane would cover the image and essentially hide it. Awesome. Finally, we need to add this anchor to the scene. Remember, to add it to the scene, we simply add it to the content guy here. So I'm going to do content.add image anchor. Awesome. We configured the reality view, which will essentially detect an image anchor and place a black plane over it. And that's it, very simply. Now, before we run this, we need to do one more thing. We need to go to the app starting point here, named after your project name, this guy here, and also marked with this main entry point. So here at the moment, we're showing our content view in a window. This is telling when the app first starts, display this window, and inside the window, display the content view that we just created earlier. So this would show the content view in a window. But this is not what we want, because we're doing ARKit based world tracking, in this case image tracking. We need to be in a mixed immersive space. And that's because any kind of ARKit based world tracking requires us to be in an immersive space, and more specifically in a mixed immersive space where camera pass-through is enabled. Great, so I'm going to replace this with an immersive space. And then for the immersion style, I need a mixed immersion style, right? So here for the selection, I'm going to create a new state variable here. So state var, and I'm going to say immersion style and autocomplete, get rid of the any, and instead of immersive, I'm going to do mixed. So this is saying, hey, we need a mixed immersive space. And I'm going to bind that state variable to this binding guy here, $immersion style. And for the options, I'm going to do mixed, progressive, and full. Great. So here we're simply saying we want a mixed immersion style for this immersive space. Awesome. And now before running the app, we need to do one last thing. We need to go to the info plist guy here. And here, first of all, under the application scene manifest role, you can see the preferred default scene session rule option. This tells ARKit what we're expecting to show when the scene first starts. So at the moment, it's saying when the app first starts, we're showing a window, but that's not true anymore. We're showing an immersive space when the app first starts, right? So replace this with immersive space application session rule. And then we also need to request permission from the user to track their world, right? Because we're doing world tracking. So for that, I'm going to create a new key here, and you need to name that NS world usage description. Make sure you spell that correctly. And then here as a string, you can pass in whatever you want as a description. So I'm going to say we need to track your world to detect ads. And this string would essentially appear in the system prompt that will appear when the user first starts the app. So this is to essentially request permissions from the user to track their world. Great, so now that you've added both of that, let's try running this app and see what we get. Now if I build and run, and I go over the add image, you can see a black plane appears on top. So that's it. We learned about image tracking in visionOS by building this ad blocker, where we use image detection to detect the ad, and when the ad appears, we overlay that with the black plane.